12 minutes in front of 4 o'clock here on what is today? Tuesday afternoon. Welcome back in. I don't know what day it is.
Does anybody really know what day it is?
Yeah. Jeremiah will be with us here in just a second. Glad to have him in. And, man, the great Charles Bloom is in the house.
That's how you know it's a big game.
See, Charles absolutely will agree. I don't think he heard us because he was just stepped out for a second, but in how closely he worked with the great Mike Slive. I know that Charles was in those meetings back in the day when he was working in Birmingham at the conference office when the former commissioner was urging school presidents, school leadership, athletics directors, invest in basketball. It will pay off.
Yeah. You build it, and it will come.
And it has worked.
And there's no wonder, the more I read about kind of the SEC's ascension in basketball, it's no surprise that some of the consultants they used were people who worked within the Big East Conference.
Yeah.
Because what did the Big East have back in the day? They had the best players, the most charismatic coaches, and they were fully committed. Of course, it'll help that a lot of those schools didn't have football teams.
Yeah.
But they fully committed to the sport.
When the Big East went to football schools, too, that was the beginning of the end, man. Unfortunately, I genuinely believe that. I miss you weren't alive, but the three of us on this side were, and I miss '80s Big East basketball, man.
See, my version of the Big East growing up was still a loaded conference, but there were a ton of teams.
Yeah.
And you had South Florida at one point, and Rutgers in there, and Cincinnati, and.
Cincinnati. I mean, Carolina fans remember Cincinnati from the old Metro days, too. So
great basketball program.
Oh, yeah, man, with Huggy. All right. So, all right, well, I see, you're good. Yeah, Jeremiah Donati is with us. Now, you've been on the program, so welcome into the studio. It's great to see you and meet you face-to-face. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me in here. Big fan of the show. And
thank you.
Fun to see your setup. It's a great operation.
Yeah, it's fun in here. And we get Charles back. It's been a while, so Charles is treating you well, right?
He's great. And, anytime you're the new guy, you rely on people with that key institutional knowledge to not only tell you where the restrooms and light switches are, but to tell you how to get around. And Charles has been fantastic. I feel very lucky to have him.
He's awesome. He's awesome. I'll tell you a quick funny story. I've known Charles now. We've known each other a long time. We met at Media Days in Birmingham many, many years ago. Probably, I don't know, Charles, 05-ish, something like that. I don't know. It's been 20 years. It wasn't until the third year that I knew him when we were talking about something away from the show one time off air. And I asked him, hey, where'd you go to college? I did not know for the first 3 years that he went to the University of South Carolina. I was like, wait, you went to Carolina? I didn't even know. I had no idea that he had gone to Carolina. So that I remember that day. And I was like, man, from that point, we got even closer. So he's a good guy. We'll talk a lot of the business stuff here in just a second, but in kind of how's Columbia for you? I mean, you've been here about a month now. I know the family will come after the school year, right? So are you finding your way around? You found good places to eat? You got good digs? How's it going?
Well, Charles has been also really helpful there, too. But, no, it's hard to believe that this is week 4. And, my family was in town last week, and, we found a school. We put an offer on a house. We saw snow. We saw a 41-point women's basketball wins, so we're getting around.
Yeah.
Tried 3 new pizza places.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been great, and it's kind of one of those things that I anticipated a warm welcome, and it's been everything but that and more. I'm very grateful to the people here on campus and the community have really kind of welcomed me with open arms. I feel very happy to be here.
Were your kids here when it snowed?
They were.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you told them, I guess people told them already, don't get used to that.
Well, and I heard for a week that, they'll say it'll snow, but it won't snow. And sure enough, we had it.
I was somewhat surprised.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you.
I grew up, I was born outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and I grew up in Washington State. So I've seen my fair amount of snow, and it never gets old, but it's especially fun to see your kids running around.
Yeah.
So that was fun. It's much like in Texas, if it hits the ground, it's slowing down or shutting down operations until the sun comes out.
Yeah, well, that's what. So you probably know then from Massachusetts days, either people that are from up that way, and they come, you're like, this is so funny to me that you guys can't do it. I'm like, no, we can't do it. We don't. It's that's not what we do around here.
Yeah, that's different snow up there.
Like here now, this is why people come south, because it's 60 degrees in the last week of January.
Well, what happens up there is you'll get to April and it'll feel like spring, and you'll get one of these nor'easters.
Yeah.
And you'll get 4 feet of snow. and it's
Now wait till your first
demoralizing.
baseball game in April here when we might push 90.
Okay. Yeah.
So then you'll be like, oh, okay, but you're used to that.
Yep. Yeah. Very similar.
Without the wind that you guys have in Texas. Well, that's good. And good pizza. That's good. That's always important.
Yeah, I'm finding my way around. There's I would say the food scene here is very underrated.
It is.
You know, when I was considering coming out here, I didn't have a lot of people telling me just how great it was, and I've kind of, you know, when you're out here by yourself, you can go to a new place every night and try it out. And I've tried a number of places that I won't name them just because we've got sponsors, and I want to make sure I'm not stepping on other people's toes. But no, it's just been great.
Don't worry, I'll press you off air for all these, and I'll throw in suggestions for from time. Don't worry, I'm a lifer, so I've been around a little bit from time to time. Only got a few seconds left here. Who you got in the big game in a couple of weeks? Who's your favorite NFL team? Do you have one?
You know, I grew up a Cowboys fan.
Okay,
and
rough.
Yeah, rough. And the first year I could really follow them, they went 1-15. And so, you know, when I moved to the state of Texas and to Dallas-Fort Worth, I thought for sure I was going to be there for a great Super Bowl run, and never saw it.
Well, you might get one.
Yeah. So, so it's hard for me to, having said all that, my daughter's a Taylor Swift fan, and I really can't like the Eagles or any other NFC East
No, that's
team.
fair, man.
So I guess by default, I'll go with the Chiefs.
We'll talk a lot of business with Jeremiah coming up. Alongside Elijah Campbell, I'm Jay Phillips. We're inside the Herndon Chevy Studios, wherever you might be. Appreciate you being with us. Got a lot to get to here over the next half hours. We've welcomed in the new athletics director at the University of South Carolina. He is Jeremiah Donati, accompanied by the great Charles Bloom here today as well. So we've discussed a few things about you're getting everything family-wise ready to go. So now it's business-wise, and you jumped right into the fire with the extensions and raises for Dawn Staley and Shane Beamer. I know a lot of that work was being done while you were being hired, maybe even a little bit ahead of that. But take us from your perspective on getting both of those deals over the finish line.
Well, I certainly had the ability to say no. Right. But Coach Tanner did a nice job working through those contracts in the fall. And, first things first, they're two great coaches. We want them to be here for a long, long time. And so those were kind of two things we needed to show up pretty quickly. So it just so happened that they just kind of in succession, boom, boom, came up. But really happy we have those secured, and we've got the future to look forward to with both of them. So, obviously women's basketball and the success they've had speaks for itself. And, Dawn just continues to elevate the program to new heights. But, Shane, just what he's done, and if all you got to do is look at recruiting, the trajectory. One of the things that really impressed me about him when I spent some time with him early, and this is before the contract was officially extended. I spent some time with him talking about what did you learn from the 5 and 7 year to last year, because they've got, if you've been over to the football operations building, they've got kind of all these mantras and sayings and words that's really cool. And he said, you know what? He said, we found in talking to some of our guys that those were just words, that we had lost kind of that core culture. So we got back to basics, whether you're the first string quarterback or the fifth string punter. We don't have five punters, but we wanted to make sure that you understood what it meant to be part of the Gamecock football program. So I was really impressed with how they kind of started over, if you will. And I think we saw it last year. There was obviously great team chemistry. And so that told me that this is the right guy for the job, or reaffirmed that rather. Right. And so I was really excited. That was my first kind of real up close in person impression of Shane.
How much did you, not that it influenced your decision on whether or not to come to Columbia, but again, both of those negotiating processes were in the works. What did you know of them when you were thinking about it? Did it matter at all to you? Like, well, am I going to jump right into doing that? How much did that, if at all, play into it?
Maybe a little bit, just in the sense that you want to go to places that have, they're on a good trajectory.
Yeah.
And candidly, I don't know that, I would have been as interested if the programs weren't going in a good direction. Right. And I really felt like they were. And obviously football is king, and that's what we're going to make most of our economic decisions around. And so to see the success they were having, and, obviously I was following the games this fall and really liked Shane as a coach, heard a lot of great things about him from other coaches, and obviously comes from great pedigree. That was really exciting, to be a part of that and to help continue to build that. So yeah, it definitely played a factor. And I would say that the success of the football program was one of the big decisions, or one of the key points in making that decision.
And when it comes to Dawn, too, obviously some news around the exact same time that it was announced that Dawn was getting the extension and the raise, is announced that there's a new payout structure for the women's college basketball tournament. It happens at the end of the year every year. And obviously, Dawn deserves the raise and the extension because she kicks a lot of tail and wins a lot of championships, cuts down a lot of nets. But now it's more profitable to be cutting down those nets with the new TV deal. How much of a factor do those type of things, especially in the sport of women's college basketball, kind of factor into maybe the urgency that you might have had taking over this job?
The timing that's a great point. The timing was great. And for those listeners at home, that payout will model, to some degree, the men's tournament model with not quite the same economics, but it'll start to matter here very quick this year. And of course, if you look back, we asked our CFO to take a look back at our success over the last 4 to 5 years, and it's real money. And so you'd like to think with the trajectory of women's basketball that we're just getting started there. And so, of course, being at the top of the hill, so to speak, that bodes well for us. But, I've been a proponent that there's more to the story of the economics of women's basketball. I think you're seeing with those television deals. I think there's some things that we need to look at from a ticketing standpoint. I just got the ticket notice for the women's tournament in Greenville. Those prices are up 35% year over year. Right. So women's basketball is going in a great direction. So, and Dawn, on her for a moment, she's a once in a generation talent. And so there's the economic side of it, but there's also the intangible benefit. The city of Columbia and USC has benefited greatly by us being blessed with having her as the coach. So there's you got to kind of look at the holistic part of it when you take all that into. It was such a no-brainer to do what we could to really show commitment to her.
With talking about the money and some of the things now, when we spoke with you in December, we talked about what your priorities were and facilities and certainly things going on at Williams-Brice. But I touched on it with you then about where things were going from a financial standpoint. We're getting closer to that now. You're in the job. Soon enough here, as long as everything goes well with the house settlement, you'll be sharing revenues. How prepared do you feel? I mean, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, you got the money. I mean, you're doing this with the coaches. You're going to have the money for the players. Do you feel comfortable in what you've assessed now that you're on the ground in Columbia with where things are headed financially in terms of being able to do those and still go up as the market goes up?
Well, as it relates to the house case settlement, I mean, we are operationalizing the department for what it looks like the next 5 to 10 years. And, I'd be lying to you if I told you we didn't have more work to do. We have a lot of work to do. And so we're kind of building the plane as we're flying it. And that's not, an issue.
You're not alone in that
unique
respect.
Or germane to USC. That's every school, whether you're in the SEC or the Big 12, the ACC or the Big 10. Everyone's going through the same thing. So
right.
I'm not saying we're far behind other schools. We're building this, in real time. And I like how it's looking. It's not without additional expense. There are some from a contracted, like one of the things just very basic operationally, we need to identify people that are, if you just said for a second, let's just assume, and I'm sure we'll talk about revenue distributions in a moment. You saw the news from the Department of Education. We're going to probably be paying student athletes in 4 sports. Let's just make that assumption. And so that's probably 125 to 150 student athletes. We need people in the department that are negotiating with agents and families. We need people that are writing these contracts, administering these contracts, balancing and supporting a cap management system, and ultimately submitting this through the SEC as part of terms of the settlement. So there's a lot of things that, that we just don't have people right now that are doing those. And so whether those are new bodies or new job functions, I mean, those are things I need to we are spending a lot of time to make sure we're building for the future. So, that's more expense. And so we've got to be really mindful. That adding $20.5 million next year is not insignificant. You may have seen some news. There are some other Power 4 institutions, notably, I think it was Michigan State and I think it was Ohio State, two perceived as the big ones that operated a loss this year.
Yeah.
And so this is real. And every school needs to think about how they operate their business differently. And so we're not exempt from that. And we are thinking about it. And those are going to be tough conversations because it just can't go on the way it has go. One of the things I said is that, someone was giving me a kind of a gripe about the house case settlement. I said, you have to remember, this is a legal settlement. this was the alternative to going out of business.
Right.
So this was not like we didn't sit down and design this, beautiful plan. This is not how any of us would have liked to set this up. This is what the trade-off was for not going out of business. The trade-off would have been losing $14 to $15 billion legal settlement and having to completely, gut your athletics department. So I think that's important to note because that's not, we didn't just like create this revenue sharing plan, overnight. This was the function of a legal settlement.
One of the things
pending legal settlement.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. One of the things that Elijah and I have talked about, and we're far from alone in this across the country, Jeremiah, as you probably know, but I've reminded people when they gripe and we call, and I get it. I'm a lifetime college sports fan too. You are too. I mean, that's why you're in the business. The reason this is happening is because for far too long, the member institutions of the NCAA were breaking federal law. Now, they've been told it. They've been shown that in court. As an athletics director yourself and what you've been doing in the Big 12, big-time school, big-time conference, how long has that kind of thought been in your head of like, we gotta stop fighting battles that we know we're going to lose?
Great question. I wish, we could, if Michael J. Fox pulled up in a time machine, and we could flip the dial to, the year 2000 when these media deals really started to pick up steam, I think we probably would have consulted with attorneys to find a more elegant solution to start to begin to share this revenue, right? Hindsight's 2020, but now we find ourselves with a less than elegant solution, which is, deal with it in, 5 months. And so, I got news for you. These issues are going to continue to pile on and compound until we get some federal help. And I'm not asking the federal government to like run college sports. We're asking for help from an antitrust protection, from, maybe even collective bargaining. There's got to be a way we can make rules without being accused of colluding. And, these are just kind of basics. Federal preemption, so we don't have 50 state laws and 50 attorney generals that are trying to outbid the next. I mean, these are existential threats to not only football, but to all of college athletics because of the downstream effect. So if we don't get that, I got news for you. There will be another lawsuit. This is, by the way, this lawsuit, for those listening at home who may not be familiar, there's only a 10-year.
Right.
It only goes out 10 years. Right. There's like, the great unknown after that. And so my hunch is it's not going to be better, right? And so this 20.5 million will look like 30 plus million by the time you get to 2030 when you just add the 4% every other year. So this is when going back to looking at our business differently. This is a real threat to all of our sports programs and to us here at USC.
I feel like that would put a little more onus on the element of your job of like fundraising. Like for an athletic director, that's already a pretty big part of the job, right? But like what you just mentioned too, I mean, that dollar amount from the House settlement is not going to get any smaller as time goes on because there might be more lawsuits. And that is kind of a rabbit hole that I think that will eventually go down. But what type of onus that put on you to be able to kind of try to up the ante when it comes to being able to raise funds and give your athletic department more of a cushion than you already have?
Yeah, well, it's a good segue into, or maybe a potential segue into Williams-Brice Stadium. And one of the things that is currently, top of my mind is there's a lot of money, literally and figuratively, locked inside Williams-Brice. I mean, it's not a secret. I think we have 18 suites. It's last in the conference. I think Arkansas, for example, has 184. We have the fewest premium seat offerings. Why is that important? Well, that's a lot of revenue that could be used to reinvest in the department. And so right now we're without that. And so what's a challenge for us in the short term is candidly huge upside because we're the only school maybe, and you could tell me this, Jay, you could look up the Power 4 schools in your computer there. I don't know how many schools really have the opportunity to build what we could potentially build. And so that's a really big opportunity for us. And obviously nothing has been approved yet. And we've had some great conversations internally and even with the board. And I'm very optimistic that we will have a plan to do this. And I think, taking a more of a holistic look at the stadium, not just one side and even beyond that, I think is really critical to our future success. And I know I probably stepped in front of some of your questions, but I think, operationalizing the House case settlement and really understanding the opportunities at Williams-Brice Stadium and you asked the fundraising component, Elijah, I think are absolutely critical to our success.
Well, I just think a lot of it does come down to, as Elijah pointed out, fundraising.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't mean this to be flippant. I mean this in kind of a tongue-in-cheek but also serious way. Like a school president and a school's athletics director, maybe that's job one. It takes on different forms.
And you think about it, the more money you can raise for a stadium project like this, the less debt you have to take out, the less institutional burden. I mean, it kind of, you see where this is going. So back to your point, the more effective we are in fundraising, the better it is for our future.
Yeah, I'll try to find out that answer for you.
I'd be curious, man. I mean, just having been in 2 conferences now and played all across the country, I just can't really think of another program, because even Kansas would have been the one I'm using, but they're renovating their stadium.
Right.
So I don't know. It'd be really curious to see if there's anyone that's got quite the upside we have.
Or even what Vandy and Northwestern have done.
Yeah,
No, they're ahead of us. I know this for a fact.
Yeah.
Northwestern's building $1 billion stadium because they came to TCU and modeled a lot of things we're doing, and Vanderbilt's got 50 or 60 suites. So they're way ahead of us.
Yeah. So there you go. There's something there. All right, we'll come back. We got more with Jeremiah Donati, the athletics director at University of South Carolina. You're listening to the Postgame Show. 20 minutes after 4 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. Welcome back in. Jay and Elijah with you. A few more minutes here with new athletics director Jeremiah Donati. Appreciate his time here in studio today. We just talked a lot for those of you just tuning in, and we'll have all this up for you on the podcast page in just a little bit and revisit some of this in the 5 o'clock hour, too, once Jeremiah and Charles have gone on to more important work.
Once you scare them off.
That's right. But we talked about a lot of finances in that first segment, and just one more on that, and that's where revenue sharing now kind of butts into, for lack of a better term, name, image, likeness. And we know that name, image, likeness isn't going to go away. Players can still go out and sign a deal with a restaurant, a car dealer, whatever. Obviously, there are some limitations there, and that may still happen. But with revenue sharing in the major sports, a lot of the need for that may go away. How do you look at name, image, likeness itself, Jeremiah, moving forward? Do you want to – I know Hillary's doing a great job. Hillary Cox in the office is doing a great job with that. In-house, do you want to see more of that? How is that going to look, and how do those two things mesh?
It's funny, we actually met on this earlier today with Hillary, and we've got a group that's helping us operationalize the House case response. Part of that's revenue share, but part of it's real NIL post July 1. And it's probably not one answer. There's probably a few different solutions. It's going to be difficult. I used to work on the NFL agency side, and when I worked for Lee Steinberg, one of our clients, one of Lee's clients, was an all-pro running back, and he had a deal with Nike that I remember was $50,000 annually. And this particular running back had to do all these things for now. Granted, this is 14 years ago, but It's not. And so I use that as context to say that if these deals are truly fair market value, the numbers we're seeing right now won't survive. They won't survive scrutiny, because that deal required this guy to fly all over the country for real commercials and that type of thing. And it was $50,000. Right. So, we're talking about, linebackers and running backs that are getting $600,000-$800,000 deals. And if you want to burn up some of your revenue share inside the cap for that, that's the institutional's decision. But to find an $800,000 real NIL deal that passes scrutiny, I'm telling you, they're very, very, very few and far between. Other than a Heisman Trophy caliber player, they just don't exist, and they certainly don't exist for offensive linemen or that type of thing. So that'll be some kind of hard industry set, assuming the letter of the law comes that the settlement's written on, assuming those things do become enforceable.
Right.
There's just you just won't see the same numbers, but it is going to be important to have NIL deals that go above the cap. And so we're looking at a number of solutions, from internal people to expanding our partnership with Learfield or our multimedia rights holders to outside entities. And so we'll have kind of what's starting to look like a multi-pronged approach to do that. And we'll have to turn up the heat on those people to make sure that they're delivering those.
And good news, I guess. You got a Heisman caliber candidate on campus.
I just saw the odds. There was someone that posted on X that you may have seen those. The early preseason odds had him. I think he was fourth. I think Lenore's
I've seen him top 10 wherever I've looked. I've seen him top 10 regardless. Yeah.
Well,
I think that's pretty darn legit.
And I'm not throwing any shade at our friends in Austin, but one of the people in front of him hasn't taken near as many snaps.
I know. Yeah.
We're
a lot of name recognition.
A lot of name recognition, but no, we're obviously excited about Lenore's and what he brings back. And I think if he has a season like he did last year, I think it wouldn't be unforeseeable to see him in New York.
That would be pretty cool.
Lace is a finalist. Yeah. It's must watch TV. But
take me back to my youth.
But I had the great fortune of being there a couple years ago with Max Duggan.
Yeah.
And that was one of the coolest things. I mean, that's a really cool experience. And so, if and truly once in a lifetime, because you get so many shots to do that. But anyhow, we'll keep our fingers crossed that Lenore's or another USC Gamecock in the near future has that experience.
Yeah. Kind of looking at the basketball court, too. I mean, right before you came in here, Jay and I were talking about the men's team. They have a really big game tonight. I mean, and part of that discussion involved this league turning into like a bleeping monster. Like, this thing is terrifying. You're an average team kind of in a league where there are no bad teams or mediocre teams. The SEC's kind of grown in men's basketball to a level that, as someone who has followed this league my entire life, it has never been. It has never been this, right? So with the modern, college basketball the way it is, what's kind of the thing that we can maybe do to improve the men's basketball program to be able to keep up with the way a lot of these other schools, like your Missouris and LSU's, even Texas's, that are able to fund their basketball programs and get them to where they have created this league to be the monster it is?
Well, what's old is new for me. I came from the top basketball conference. I think like 12 years running, the Big 12 was considered the top basketball conference. And then the year I leave, I think the SEC is taking over.
You can't escape it.
Taking that home. So I'm very used to that because we used to say this.
So it's you. That's good. Right,
we used to say this when I was at TCU. There are no easy wins. I mean, every single game, and we're seeing that this year in the SEC, is just a dogfight, and it's really been a tale of two seasons for the men's and women's program. We were talking off air about the Clemson game, and just, seemingly things were going in a great direction, had some injuries, and we just have not had any luck since then. But I'll tell you, I think Lamont can really coach, and I think that his brand of basketball, even with some of the injuries, we've seen us, really give some of the best teams in the country everything they can handle, and probably should have won those games. And so that's encouraging if you're a Gamecock fan, I feel like we do have a coach who can coach. Do we have a talent gap? I mean, that's something that he and I are really going to have to talk about. I mean, I think we've got some good players. I think we clearly probably didn't have the depth that we need to compete night in and night out, and that's a little evident that we're seeing that in real time. So, it's not the question came up. It's not a matter of if Lamont's coming back. It's how can we better support him? And so when the season's over, I actually have a meeting with him next week to start that conversation about what NIL looks like in the spring, and then into revenue sharing. So, because it's not just about paying players and finding more money to pay players. Yes, that's part of it. But what are we doing as a program to help continue to build that? So it's an ongoing evaluation. It's probably not one or two things I could tell you right now that I can tell you, but yeah, we need some more depth. I could tell you that's probably one thing that we'll be looking at and making sure that the roster's strong, because I don't anticipate a big drop off in the league next year. So but we've got some key pieces that we think we can bring back, and so if you can do that and continue to build this and bring in some new guys, I think we will like what we see. But we certainly have some work to do. But I've been just really impressed with some of this hard luck we've continued to battle, and we've found ourselves in these games. And so, we've got a big one tonight at Georgia, but I think that's, it's probably a winnable game. And so we'll see what the guys come up with.
I got about 90 seconds left. You could probably go 90 minutes on this answer, but you've mentioned the Big 12, and you're coming into the SEC now, and obviously one of the big two. Has life been different for you from that perspective in working with your colleagues? I mean, most of the day-to-day stuff, I imagine, isn't a whole lot different in terms of administrating, but now you're in the SEC. What's that been like for you?
Very similar in the sense that my first AD call, the issues were exactly the same.
Right.
They were just had different faces and different brands attached to them. The biggest difference, I'd say, is probably the personality of the commissioners, both of whom I'm big fans of, but they're very different. And I'm saying that kind of jokingly, I'm smiling at you. But, the issues are the same at the Power 4 level. They come in different shapes and sizes, but the same things we were talking about in the Big 12 athletic director's room, we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And so, we're all kind of, that's the good news, I think, about all this, is that there's not, we're all kind of in this together. We're all trying to figure this out together. And one thing that gives me hope, back to the kind of where we started with the House case, is that, previously the NCAA made rules and we had to follow them. This is unique in the sense that the commissioners are the ones creating these enforcement agencies going forward. So we get a chance to some degree to help kind of cast part of our future. And so when you have guys like Greg Sankey, and Brett Yormark and others who are really smart and committed to doing that for the sake of their leagues, you have a chance, and there's reason for hope.
Yeah. Great to see you. I say great to meet you, but we've met at least on the phone, but now we've met face to face. Thank you. We'll do this again as often as you're ready to, and you're in good hands with Mr. Bloom over there.
This has been a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of the show and look forward to being back on here after a few more basketball wins.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. Good stuff. Absolutely. That's Jeremiah Donati. He is the athletics director at the University of South Carolina. Recap some of what he had to say for you when the post-game show returns.